Welcome to part 3 of my Saving the Prequels series. Today we're going to be discussing my Jar Jar Binks theory. Now, let me start by saying that I realize that for most Star Wars fans, there's absolutely nothing that could ever be done or said that would ease their hatred for Jar Jar Binks and the big part he played in ruining mainly Episode 1. He's the ultimate irredeemable character, even more so than Kylo Ren, who killed perhaps the most beloved Star Wars character of all time, that being Han Solo. Spoiler alert there. And could very well kill more in subsequent movies, like maybe his Uncle Luke or his mother Leia, or who knows. Now, even if Lucasfilm came out tomorrow and said they were retconning Jar Jar's very existence and for future reference the fan edits that remove him from the movies entirely would be official canon, I don't think people would forgive him even for that. Now, with all that being said, recently there was a fan theory that basically suggested that Jar Jar Binks was a mastermind Sith Lord that plotted and planned everything, and that his clumsy outward appearance was just an act. It even suggested, now this was before The Force Awakens actually came out, that he'd be Supreme Leader Snoke. For whatever reason, a lot of people ate this theory up, and some I think even really wanted it to be true, even though I'm not sure anyone believed it was actually a possibility, because Lucasfilm was never going to touch Jar Jar again and put him in the new movies. That would have just been a death sentence. Anyway, to me, this says that Star Wars fans want to find a way to come to terms with Jar Jar, who, like it or not, is a part of the Star Wars canon, and that'll never change. It's hard to wrap your brain around, but Jar Jar Binks really does exist in the very same universe that the events of The Empire Strikes Back happen in. Anyway, my theory about Jar Jar kind of goes in the opposite direction of the evil mastermind Sith Lord one. And it's probably not even a new one. In fact, I'd be surprised if plenty of other people haven't thought of it already and it hasn't been written or talked about or other videos exist about it. What I'm going to do, though, is propose my theory by adding 2 quick scenes to The Phantom Menace. For some people, at least, this might make Jar Jar's presence a bit more tolerable as it gives him a greater purpose overall. Others might call what I'm about to suggest just sacrilege, but here goes. The first scene would be with Padme and Qui-Gon talking while Jar Jar was off in the far background doing something stupid and Jar Jar-like. It could either take place on Tatooine or shortly after they leave the planet and are on their way back to Coruscant. Basically, Padme would ask Qui-Gon why he bothered bringing Jar Jar along in the first place, since he's a klutzy idiot. Qui-Gon would patiently reply that he believes the Force is strong with Jar Jar, but that Jar Jar is not necessarily strong with the Force. Now, Padme would of course look confused by this answer, so Qui-Gon would go on to give her a brief spiel about how the Force works. That it's everywhere, that it surrounds us, binds us. Basically the same kind of speech that Yoda gave in The Empire Strikes Back or Obi-Wan gave in A New Hope. This would be kind of nice considering, if The Phantom Menace was the first Star Wars movie you ever watched, they don't really explain too much in that movie. They kind of assumed you watched the original trilogy, which sure most did, but not everybody did, so it wouldn't be a bad scene just in that respect. Anyway, I'm getting a little off track. Qui-Gon would then go on to say that instead of wielding the Force as a Jedi does, the Force manifests itself in Jar Jar in the form of uncanny luck. Qui-Gon would basically then say, he brought him along as nothing more than a good luck charm. At this point, Padme would look even more confused and say something along the lines of, well, the Force seems very confusing. She'd then go on to say she didn't even know that the Force was real or didn't even believe that it was real until Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan literally dropped out of the sky and rescued her. And she would probably offer some little apology at that point for doubting the Force and the Jedi. Qui-Gon, though, he wouldn't be offended by this. He's not going to be upset. He's going to explain that the galaxy is a huge place, and that there are only 10,000 Jedi, which might seem like a lot, but there are numerous inhabited worlds out there. Plus, Jedi don't exactly go around flaunting their powers. So the vast majority of beings in the galaxy will never encounter a Jedi. So most people, even in the time of the Jedi, believe them to be little more than stories or even just Republic propaganda. Now, this little scene would be nice and important because, first of all, it explains Jar Jar's stupid, impossible luck that we see over and over again in The Phantom Menace. Some people may not like the idea that the Force would have anything to do with Jar Jar in the first place, much less be powerful with him, but what's the alternative? That he really does have the most incredible luck ever? And second, and maybe more importantly for continuity's sake, it explains why during the time of the original trilogy, which is only roughly 20 years after the end of Episode 3, that no one seems to believe the Jedi ever existed. And that's because not many believed in them in the first place while they were around and while they were at the height of their power. And, sure, the Empire does try to erase their traces and stuff after Order 66, so in a smear campaign, if you will, I guess. Um, and I don't know about you, but when I saw the original trilogy before the prequels ever came out, I always envisioned that the Jedi had been gone for a very long time. Even though Obi-Wan really wasn't old enough for them to be gone that long, I certainly didn't think while watching A New Hope that the Empire was only 19 years old, that the Jedi had only been gone for the same amount of time. Anyway, back to Jar Jar being favored by the Force. You could even go so far as to say that Jar Jar getting kicked out of the Gungan city by Boss Nass for being clumsy was the will of the Force, so that he'd run into Qui-Gon and eventually fulfill his overall destiny. And yes, I know you don't want to believe that the Force has anything to do with Jar Jar, or that he had a destiny or a real purpose, but keep in mind Jar Jar's ultimate destiny was to be the one who made it possible for Palpatine to eventually become Emperor. He was the one who proposed granting emergency powers to the Supreme Chancellor, a proposal that passed perhaps because of Jar Jar's uncanny luck? Okay, my next scene then would take place somewhere at the bitter end of The Phantom Menace and would probably feel really out of place in the movie if it was actually in there. But again, this is just kind of like an extended edition I would love to see done, and certain things added to the movie. Not changed, because those movies are always going to be what they are, but you can always go back and try to add things to help it make sense. Anyway, perhaps at Qui-Gon's funeral, Palpatine could turn towards Padme and say something like, I've been giving some thought to my vacated senatorial seat, to which Padme, or Queen Amidala, whatever you want to call her, will give him a look like, this really isn't the time to talk about this, we'll discuss this later. Palpatine will, ignore it and say, well, perhaps the Gungan Jar Jar Binks could take the position in the interim, and once a replacement can be found, he could, remain on as a representative for the Gungan people. Nothing more than an honorary position, but a gesture of goodwill that would keep our relations with the Gungans strong. The Queen will give it some thought and finally nod and say, maybe that's not such a bad idea. After all, Qui-Gon did say the Force was strong with him, and that's why he's so lucky. Of course, our boy Palps will look pleasantly surprised. Oh, he's strong with the Force, as if he didn't know, which, of course, he already knows that and already has plans to use him down the road someday. And, of course, he eventually does in Episode 2 when he not only, not so subtly convinces Jar Jar to propose the Senate give Palpatine emergency powers, which he then uses to create the clone army, a proposal that ultimately allows him to become emperor with an army at his complete whim. The beauty of this scene would be it begins to show the incredible machinations of Palpatine, and that foresight is one of his greatest strengths, if not the greatest strength he possesses. It also helps the start of Episode 2 make more sense. Palpatine is at the ultimate root of the assassination attempts on Padme's life. He wants her out and Jar Jar in at this critical time in his master plan. Now, I don't think Palpatine really wants her dead at this point. Not that I want to get into this theory right now, but I do think her off and alone with Anakin serves him on two fronts. One, it obviously puts Jar Jar in the role of senator for him to manipulate, and two, he wants Padme and Anakin to fall in love so that he can use that relationship to help turn Anakin to the dark side down the road. Okay, well that's my Jar Jar Binks theory. To sum it all up, and why Qui-Gon meeting Jar Jar was so important to the saga, and maybe the most important meeting ever, well, I think it's clear that during the time of the prequels, the Force is completely unbalanced towards the light side of the Force. So it basically used Jar Jar to ultimately allow Palpatine to become the Emperor and put the light side of the Force back into check. This whole chain of events, which ultimately led to that climactic ending of Return of the Jedi, where Vader finally picks up the Emperor and throws him into the shaft, it started with Qui-Gon and Jar Jar's fateful meeting in the swamps of Naboo that day. Now, do you love this theory? Do you absolutely hate it? Do you think I'm crazy? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. In part 4 of my Saving the Prequels series, I'll touch more on that theory of just how much Palpatine used Padme to turn Anakin to the dark side. Till then, may the Force be with you.